So in today's episode, we're talking with Andrew, who talks about his journey into short-term rentals and how he's able to secure a property in Mexico that's cash flowing him $2,500 per month. We go over his journey into entrepreneurship and how he's able to secure this property from a different country. This is for all my folks out there who are looking to do Airbnbs outside of the United States, and Andrew is the perfect person to learn this from. So with that being said, let's get into the episode. All right, we're here with Andrew Wolf today. Awesome student, been able to crush it, right off the bat. So Andrew, just wanted to, first understand a little bit about your background, what you do for work, and also what, made you want to start in an Airbnb business, and we'll take it from there.
So my background, I was in the hospitality industry and hotel management for about 15 years. Now I'm in a related field, but more on the software side for a company that makes software for hotels. So that's kind of industry that's very familiar to me. And a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, I'd been turned on to the concept of Airbnb arbitrage, but without knowing really what it was or a name for it or how to go about it. So it was something that I was very interested in the concept, but I did not have at that time a way to really execute it. There's a lot of questions I had going forward. I was curious about it, but then COVID hit, and then I didn't really pursue anything at that time and put it on hold until I actually just came across one of your podcasts through Instagram, actually, is where I kind of turned on to your program, and then really everything started to click. As far as how do we approach the landlord? Just the regular concepts that seemed very clear after that. But before that, it was I didn't even understand how to get past that with landlords and putting all the pieces together that you do to kind of successfully pull that off.
So it sounds like you're, interested in the idea, just kind of the step-by-step process of it. You were just kind of a little bit intimidated by that.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, let's take a step back a little bit further, right? So when it comes to entrepreneurship, whether it comes to an Airbnb business or it's any sort of, venture that you kind of go off in your own in general, there's always it's interesting talking to people because they have this kind of either light bulb moment or, it's how they were raised, right? So what made you want to get into entrepreneurship in general?
Oh, yeah. So going back farther, I guess I was always raised to kind of think outside the box a little bit. As far as from an entrepreneurship mindset, thinking of other avenues of, revenue streams. But also years ago, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and by Robert Kiyosaki. And that kind of got the ball rolling for thinking about how I really wanted to be able to start some kind of business. And then sometimes it took time to look at different methods and different opportunities out there to see which would be a good fit. And as a lot of people do, you have some that work out, some that don't, and trial by error over time. But that was one of the things that kind of put things in perspective about different people, how they look at that, the entrepreneurship, the business mindset, and kind of doing things that we're not necessarily taught to in school, as far as how to look at other avenues and revenue streams and how to kind of build those assets so they're kind of working for you instead of you working for someone else.
Yeah, I think Rich Dad Poor Dad is one of the biggest kind of mindset shifts of the generation. Growing up, taught in school, study hard, get a good job, and work your way up the corporate ladder. That's how you become successful. But I think that book really challenged us on what it really means to become financially successful. And there's so many different avenues that you can take to do it. So yeah, definitely one of those people that had that mindset shift when I read that book. So let's shift gears a little bit and let's kind of talk about, how did you find your first property? I believe your property was located somewhere in Mexico, right?
Yeah, I did a little bit of non-traditional outreach to landlords. And I was looking at a lot of different locations. I actually found someone through Facebook groups because I started looking through different Facebook groups that helped connect landlords and arbitrage, connecting those dots to find people. And I found some people down in Tulum. I started to look into that market. I connected with a guy down there that had a property, and then with a property management company down there. There's a lot of trial and error down there. It's more complex in some ways in the U.S. just because being a foreign citizen, you have to how to get around certain things, how to make things work. But I found something that's a good opportunity there just because the market conditions that are right. They're about to have a brand new international airport opening in December in Tulum is where it's at. That was really attracted me to that market. So digging into a property manager, and then they connected me with some brokers just because it's a little more challenging down there to compare like you can on Zillow here in the US, where you can find out what's fair pricing for several different rentals and things like that. So that was a little bit more legwork that has to be done to kind of get into that. Understanding the market, do a little more research. It's a little harder to find things. AirDNA was helpful, although it's not as complete in some of those markets as we're used to here in the U.S. But that was a big tool that helped me kind of in narrowing down whether it was a profitable market to access.
So it's interesting because, a lot of people I talk to, they're scared to do anything remote, right? And, even our very first property, we did that completely remote. Obviously I'm in Utah, the property is in Arizona. And so in my mind, I'm like, worst case scenario, a couple hour flight away if, anything were to happen, because I'd never done anything remote at that point. But, the way I've designed the program, everything can be done remote and kind of have that confidence to do that. But what are some of the ways that you overcame that fear of, not being able to, especially being in a completely different country? Like, what gave you that confidence to go ahead and, take care of that on your very first property, do that remote?
I think that some of the unique factors was just finding those partners, really. I think the confidence, because if I hadn't found the right partners that had a lot of those things already in place, because they were focused on Airbnb arbitrage. So it kind of understands the concept. They understood the concept and were trying to tailor their program to that. So that being said, they work with a lot of different aspects that were already something that you taught in your program, as far as understanding like how to, the furniture and all the furnishings that have anything that's needed. It was less intimidating. I think now I even built a lot more confidence where I could do that without a property management company. Once you get through that and you find out, okay, there's a lot of things that maybe I was more worried about than I should have been as far as the setup was concerned. But it did put me at ease having partners that knew the in and outs of that local market, because I think that's another real thing that can be scary, is you don't know as far as a housekeeping team or maintenance on site until you can plug in with somebody local that you feel comfortable with. That goes a long ways for feeling like you can pull that off, because at the end of the day, those are the people that are really doing that, day in and day out work to keep that property going. They're going to be one of the most valuable parts of your team, to be able to, when you have somebody you can trust, you feel comfortable with what the operations that maybe that they've done like that in the past. That really goes a long way for instilling confidence that it's not something I'm alone on. And the remote nature is less daunting when you feel like you have somebody who can implement, your vision and what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think you hit on a lot of key points. Having that trusted boots on the ground team is vital, because even if it's in your backyard, you're going to want to hire the cleaners and the handyman. You don't want to be doing all that stuff. So that's where the upfront, vetting of these people comes into play. Because I think once you start talking to a few of these different vendors, you can kind of understand like who actually knows what they're talking about, who you feel is going to trust, and, getting references on who's going to actually take care of the property. And that only comes with that real life experience, right? I can give you all the scripts, all the templates in the world, but if you're not actually out there, implementing it, then, it's not going to go anywhere, right? Really great job of, talking to those and figuring out those trusted people, because there's 2 properties in our portfolio I've never even been to. Right? I've never even been to that state. And so you don't have to ever step foot in it if you have that trusted boots on the ground team. So, really good job on that.
Oh, yeah. And a lot of that confidence, I think, in that approach was built having the understanding of what was required, from going through the modules of the program. And it also helped a lot on the negotiation stage, knowing what I needed for numbers to get out, what I wanted out to make it worth my time to even you're putting any money down. That was something that went a long ways for renegotiating even lower management fees, because just looking at the numbers and sharing that with where I needed to be with the property manager, just being open with him about what that looked like to me to be able to close the deal, that helped me prepared for that. So I could tell what was a reasonable about what I needed to get out of it from them. And they were impressed by that preparedness. I think they're used to a lot of people coming into this with an idea, similar concept, but not having the legwork done and a real understanding of what it takes to make it profitable. And so that went a long ways for instilling confidence that we were doing due diligence correctly, that I knew what I was getting into would have the results I was looking for in the end.
Yeah, and whether that's my program, whatever program out there, like you need to make sure that you have that education foundation in place. Or unfortunately, there's a lot of bad actors out there that can take advantage of you if you don't know what you're talking about and haven't done that upfront research. But if you come in, you talk the same terminology, you understand what you need from like a management fee for in your example, where you guys need to be at in order to make it profitable for you. That like those are all big things where they're like, oh, like this guy actually knows what he's talking about. It goes a long way to build your credibility as well. No, great stuff, man. So as far as cash flow for this property, what is it looking like on this property here?
So right now it's very seasonal, more seasonal than I realized just getting into it, because that market is still their summer times are kind of slow because they're off season when everything else is open. We're looking at heavy season and averaging out probably over the whole year. I'm hoping for an average around right now $1,500 per month that I would be looking at on average for the first year. That's going to be a lot better in year 2, just because right now that market is about to really pick up because they're adding this international airport that'll allow direct flights in there. That's where we're looking at 1,500 right now on average. During the high season, it's more in the $400 ADR, and then right now we can be just around 100. So it kind of swings a bit, and that's something just to be aware of. I think that's where you really have to do that legwork to see if that's worth it too, because the occupancy percentage and things is a little softer than we originally were hoping for, but that's just comes with the territory. But I think we're going to be a strong second year, especially when we get into the second year, because of the things that market is poised to really take off.
Yeah, I mean, $1,500 a month, I think a lot of people would take that, as extra income, any day, right? Especially on your first property. But I know another really cool thing that you touched on, and this applies to like any market you're looking at, is those different opportunities within those markets, right? Like today, you're, of course, like the first and most important thing should be cash flows from day one. And then the second important thing is to look at the potential of this market, right? There's a lot of markets out there that, I wouldn't personally touch just because I feel, it's kind of been capped out. But like you said, you found this opportunity where there's just going to be huge international airport being built out, more demand coming in, and then you're going to be able to capitalize on that, because you already have a property in place there. That's a really kind of soft spot in the market that you can, capitalize on in moving forward to increase your revenue as well. You don't want to obviously bank on that, but it's a great, value add, to your point. So what are some of your long-term goals, let's say in the next six to 12 months, with your current portfolio? Like what are you looking at?
Oh yeah. So this one, of course, this just being the first, I'm trying to get this, make sure that we get all of the cash flows, that I'm getting my returns that I'm expecting in that first, that we're looking for that target of that 7-month time frame. Might slip a little farther than that just because the summer was a little soft before I'll get my cash on cash return for that property. But that's the first thing. Goal is getting that solidified, kind of make sure that cash flow is coming in consistently and where I need it to be before going on to a next one. I plan on doing more now in the States. It's possibly, if things look good down in Mexico, I feel comfortable possibly adding a second property there. But I'm looking at some other markets that are, tier 3 markets in the US type of thing, where some tier 2, where they have a strong year-round base. That's what I'm kind of looking more, putting in more in probably more like the third quarter of this year is where I'm looking at, 25. That way 24 of them, because we want to build that out where get the first one up and running, going smoothly, making a good cash flow, and then flip some of that into another property. Just because I'd like to have in 2 years, at least 4 property up and running in the next 2 years.
I mean, you're well on your way. The first one is always the hardest, but there's so many things that you learn from that one that you can apply to the ones that you move forward, moving forward. So, it's definitely the same thing that we experience in our portfolio as well. So how much time per week would you say you're dedicating to, actually managing your property right now? Because I think, even for myself, I kind of stayed away from the short-term rental hospitality business for a while, even though I've been in real estate for, several years now, just because of the, thinking that it was just going to turn into another full-time job. How often and, how many hours would you say per week are you spending on your actual property?
Oh, actually, now that it's up and running, a lot less, just because, I might spend 5 hours some weeks, and then some other weeks, it might be a little more than that, just because it's more like tweaking at this point. The property management, the team is really crucial. So they handle a lot of the day-to-day communication with guests. So that's not generally something that I'm having to do on myself, other than reviewing that, seeing where we're at. So it's more to do with the numbers, tweaking, looking at the market where we need to tweak rates and things like that. So it's really not a huge time commitment on a week-to-week basis after it's up and running. But that again has to do with what your team is and how involved they are, and what if they have a virtual assistant, those type of things. Doing that's really going to determine a lot more. But be having people in the maintenance and housekeeping and having them run all that for me, it's very minimal amount of time that I'm actually doing on a day-to-day basis.
That's awesome, man. And that way you can spend more time on, focusing on the, the high value activities, looking for properties, things that will move the needle in your business. Awesome. So to wrap this up, what would you say to someone that's, considering joining, trying to start their own business, Airbnbs, otherwise, what piece of advice would you have for that person?
I think really it's kind of looking into maybe your strong suits, your interests, and what you're familiar with. I think that's a good starting point for me, was something where my experience in the hospitality industry, I didn't always see how that could translate to my own business, because I wasn't going to be able to afford to build my own hotel, for instance. That was not on the near-term possibilities. Coming across the Airbnb, it was familiar enough to me where I understood the concept. And so that was something that I felt comfortable and more confident in getting into. But it also is just looking at those opportunities that might just fit your personality. Airbnb business was just unique because for me, I think that could be still a good avenue for others. We also have to take into consideration that you're always going to get good and bad information and bad press, good press. So being able to kind of weed through that, I do appreciate, hearing feedback from other people in the industry that looking through, okay, we might see some challenges here or that, or some of the outlook might be negative for certain things, but taking a step back and realizing if you've done your due diligence, those shouldn't be as big of a factor for you. Maybe what's happening in, a market like New York or California, where I would personally stay away from. But finding those hidden gems, I guess, finding something that's maybe a better fit for you, that is a little bit less volatile and just fits your skill set for things that you would be interested in exploring.
For sure, man. Great insights. Appreciate the time here and excited for people to see this when it goes live. So
Awesome.
Have a good one, dude.